Welcome to the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Mullings. I'm an author, speaker, and marketing mentor, and I believe in the importance of women of faith in business stepping up and shining in their lane so they can have the impact, income, and influence they were born to make. Join me this season to hear the stories of powerful women of faith who have authored a collaborative, purpose driven book to make a difference in the world. And be sure to join the Women Faith Plus business community on Facebook by going to nadinemullings.com/community. See you in the powerful community of women of faith in business and enjoy this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. I am super excited because I have an amazing panel today. We're going to be talking about an awesome collaborative book project. So I'm excited to talk to the visionary author and the co-authors that have been a part of this book project. So welcome to this episode. So the book is The Heart of God for Her, a 45-day devotional revealing God's love for his leading ladies. I love that. I love that so much, especially because a lot of the leading ladies that are mentioned in the book, some of them you don't even really think about, right? A lot of them are you think about Eve and Sarah and all the main characters, but going through this devotional, there's some women that you don't even sometimes even recognize their name initially. So I love that this devotional really covers a lot of great and amazing leading ladies in the Bible. So I'm going to kick it off first by introducing the awesome visionary author, the idea behind this book, which is Allison Denise. She is creative since a child. Allison Denise began designing in 2008 with websites, flyers, and Speaker One sheets. She became a full-time author brand strategist 8 years ago after being wrongfully terminated by her employer 1 week after giving birth to her preemie third child. We can talk more about that later. But that was the push she needed from God to step into her calling. We definitely need those pushes sometimes. Allison Denise self published her first best selling book in 2015 and is now a 13-time best selling author and a 10x anthology visionary. She gave her life to Christ at the age of 18 and was licensed and ordained as a minister in 2019. As the creative director and designer of beautiful books and brands, she has since empowered 200 plus women to make big impacts via their books. Love that, love that, love that. Welcome to the podcast, Allison Denise.
Yes,
So glad to
ma'am. Thank
have
you so
you.
much for having me. Thank you.
You are welcome. And we have two amazing co-authors also on the panel today. So I'm going to have them both introduce themselves. We have Deborah and Brejette. And Deborah and Brejette, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do. And we'll start with Deborah, and it's Deborah DeCoteau. Did I say that right?
DeCoteau, that's fine, yeah.
DeCoteau.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Deborah DeCoteau, welcome to the podcast. Could you introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Deborah DeCoteau. It's French. I'm originally from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. I came
Awesome.
here with my dad and my mom when I was a teenager, and I didn't like it, but I love it now. I design costumes for Carnival. I don't know if you know what Carnival is, but it's the parades, the Caribbean parades that we have around the world. I am a wellness director for about 4 years now. I am retired, so I have a lot of time to do little projects like make my earrings that I'm wearing right now.
Love
Hello.
it.
And I'm always available to participate in writing, being a co-author with Allison, because she's really a visionary that I admire, and she's a good leader.
Awesome.
Aw.
I love that. And I am definitely familiar with Carnival. I have a Caribbean background. My parents are Jamaican. So we don't have Carnival like Trinidad. We don't have to turn up like Trinidad, but I'm definitely familiar with the Caribbean vibe and the Carnival. So I love it. And I love your creativity from all angles, Deborah. So excited to have you with us for the podcast episode today. Brejette Emery.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having us here today. I really am excited and just being able to just be amongst other amazing ladies. And I have a background in supporting families and individuals that come from incarceration. That's like my major lane right now. So I have multiple contracts and leading teams in that space and supporting with resources and teaching life skills and job readiness inside of prisons throughout the state of New Mexico, which is where I reside in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am the executive director and co-founder of a nonprofit, Inspire Empower New Mexico. I am the founder of the women's ministry Empowerment with Bree, where I provide supports to women that are called. They know they have a calling on their lives. They know that there's things that they're supposed to be doing, but now what, right? So what do they do from there? And then I am also, wrote several different books alongside with Allison and one of my own, and just many, many, many hats I wear. As just being a servant heart of God, I believe that's just kind of what my call is and what I do. So thank you again for having us here today.
You are so welcome. And thank you for the work that you do in the world. That's so needed and necessary, having that fresh start after incarceration, the right resources, the right mindset, so many things that's needed for that. So I love the work that you're doing in the world. So
Thank
you
you.
guys are all authors for The Heart of God for Her, a 45-day devotional revealing God's love for his leading ladies. So I'm going to kick off the first question by asking Allison, what was your vision when did God just drop this idea in your mind? Like, what was the whole vision of The Heart of God for Her?
Well, it started out with just, I wanted it to be a conference initially. And I don't know what sparked it in the very beginning, but something in me was like, we need to focus more on the ladies in the Bible. It's a very male-dominated book, if you will. And I thought that there was so much richness in all of the different stories of the women in the Bible that we don't often talk about. And so this book is the opportunity for us to talk about it, to read about it, to learn about it, and see how we can apply that to our current lives. And I just wanted the ultimate message of this book. I just wanted women to know that no matter where you've been, what you've experienced, what you've done, God loves you. And here are 45 different examples of that love.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good, Allison. So good. 45 different examples of the love that God has for you. And I mentioned this, I don't know if I mentioned it before we started recording or at the very top of the recording, that I love that this devotional pointed out certain women that are maybe overlooked, right? Some of them don't even necessarily have a name, right? The woman with the issue of blood, right? We never know who her name is. There's some of these characters have no names, but their impact and their story can make a difference in our lives even today. So I love that you guys were able to identify 45 women and share their stories and how that has impacted each one of the authors' lives. So let's talk a little bit about the logistics of the book. How many total authors? I think I counted 14. I'm not sure if that's accurate. How many total co-authors for The Heart of God for Her book?
Yes, there were 14 co-authors plus myself makes 15 in total.
Awesome. And how did you guys decide on how many chapters each author was gonna write? What was the logistics behind that?
Well, I knew I wanted it to be a 45-day devotional. And so I asked the women to find 3 different women in the Bible that they could relate to, and then take those and create the devotions, one for each day. And so each woman had 3, at least 3. Some people did 2, but most people had 3, and they did 3 devotionals, one for a day.
Awesome. Now, did you find any overlap? Because there are certain women that are super popular, like, and probably everybody wants to write about a certain woman, like Esther, right? Everyone loves Esther's story. So, did you find some
Mhm.
people wanted to write about the same woman, and how did you approach those cases?
I did find that. There were a couple where I just kind of said, well, this person has already selected that woman. Please, can you choose someone else? And then there were cases where I was like, no, I really think you should write about this woman. Can you choose somebody else? And I just kind of did that behind the scenes. And it wasn't like a difficult process or anything. It just was a conversation that needed to be had.
Yeah, definitely. So, Deborah and Brejette, I'd love to find out what was your reason and why did you decide to join the project? What was the biggest pull for the heart of God for her as to why you decided, yes, I definitely want to be in this project?
My reason is because, as I said, Allison called me and asked me if I wanted to be part of the project. And knowing the Bible, that how I know the Bible, and knowing there are so many promises God has made, because I've been through my own ups and downs, my hills and valleys and whatever. And I just wanted to be part of it so other people can learn. Whenever you're going through these struggles,
Mm,
just there's always God's mercy. You always have to have the faith. And
yeah,
I just want to be part of it just because of that. So I want, yeah, just to, especially the younger generation,
yeah,
they have no clue. Most of them have
yeah,
no clue where to turn when things go, especially nowadays. So that's why I wanted to be part of it.
yeah. I love that. When Allison calls, Deborah will answer. She will be a part of the like Allison called, so I'm gonna answer. But I love that too, that you wanted to make sure that you showcase God's promises and that in every story there's a struggle, but there's a purpose in it all. So I love that you shared that, Deborah. Bridget, how about you? Why did you decide to join the book project?
For me, it was a little different.
Hmm.
We had a mutual friend or a couple of mutual friends that had also, been introduced to the project, and I had some that reached out to me, and this was my first time writing. So I was like, yeah, I don't
Mm.
know. And then even more, when you start talking about the Bible, and then you're like thinking about, how many people are going to read it? What are their questions going to be? And, at that point, I wasn't as far as my journey. So I was just kind of like, I don't know if this is the project for me. But I
Mm.
prayed on it, and I really believe that this was a next level step for me in my direction with God and where He was calling me to be. But what initially grabbed my attention, same thing that the idea of the different women in the Bible. And I was like, well, 45 days. I'm like, well, what women are there, right? So same thing. Everybody started to put the names out there, and you're kind of like, well, who do I want? And I actually had to reach out to a mentor, and I had just like a moment of like, let's just kind of go through these ladies and let me really figure out like where God rings true to what might make sense, because we didn't have like all the time in the world, right? You have to get this done. You got a timeline to meet. Um, but that's what drew me to it, is also having an interest in like who were the other women in the Bible and what were God's promises to those women? What were their stories? What did
Yeah.
that look like? Right. And to then, as I started to write, it helped me to understand a lot of the things that I've gone through and a lot of like where God has met me in my story in creating that alignment. So for me, I think it was just kind of it was a process, because at first I was kind of running. I was like, no, I don't know. But then it made sense, and it still makes sense. I mean, I think, that's the reason why I joined.
Yeah, I love that, and I love your honesty. Everybody's reason and how they go about it is different. So keeping it real, you were like, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm a writer, which surprises me because when I was reading the devotional, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you wrote like four
I
different
did.
days. And that was a lot more than a lot of people. So when you mentioned that, I was like, what? She wrote a lot. And I was going to say, I love the title of each one of your sections. I was like, man, each one of her titles could be a book on its own. So I love that in the decision-making process, you prayed about it. You
Mhm.
prayed for guidance as to, is this the right project for me to be in? And then you stepped into that, even if you were uncertain, unsure in the beginning. And look what God did. Right now,
Yeah.
you wrote four.
Yeah.
You wrote a lot of chapters. So I love that. So let's talk about the book format a little bit, and then we're going to get into the women. I definitely want to talk about the women that you guys selected, their stories, why you selected them, all that good stuff. But I want everyone to also know how the book is formatted for each one of those days. So each one of those days starts off with a scripture verse, then it goes into the story of the woman, and then also the author tells their side or how that story impacted them or a part of the story basically, and then it ends with a prayer. So each one of the days devotional has a prayer. So Allison, what made you decide to go with that format for each day of the devotional, the scripture verse, the story of the woman, then the author telling the story, and the prayer? And was it the choice of the author as to what scripture verses they use, or tell us a little behind the scenes of that format?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it was up to the author to decide which scripture they wanted to use to headline the chapter. Of course, it just needed to be something that related to the woman that they were,
Right,
writing about.
right.
Um, the format, I definitely wanted to make sure that we weren't just teaching about the woman in the Bible, but we were also giving, I guess, direction on how they can apply. Like, what's the point of me reading this? Okay, it's great to know who she is and what she experienced, but how does this apply to me? Which, in the minds of most readers of any book, that's the question. What does it have to do with me? It sounds
Exactly.
selfish, but that's why we're reading books, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that we covered that ground. And then the prayer was more just to kind of bring it full circle. Like, okay, we talked about God, we talked about the woman, we talked about ourselves. Let's bring it back to God. God, help us to extract from this reading what we need to apply to our lives today. And that prayer was why I put that there. That's why I put the prayer there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that format. So let's get into some of these women that you guys talk about in the book. So Allison, I want to start off with you. You wrote "Prepared Just for You," and the woman that you selected was Eve. So tell us a little bit about your section, why you chose Eve. And then you also wrote "You Can't Stay Here, Sis," woman with the issue of blood. So why did you choose those two particular women to write about in this book?
Well, first of all, Eve is my favorite woman in the Bible. She's popular in an unpopular way, and that's what I loved about her. She has a bad rap. And I
Mm,
thought, what better way to reverse that or give people a different perspective on Eve than to write about the positive aspects of her story? And so, yes, we know that she ate the apple, and now we have pain with childbearing, and we have to answer to our husband and all these things, right? But what were the point I was making with Eve is that she was a pioneer. She was the first, and I resonate with that, being the firstborn daughter, the firstborn granddaughter in my family, the first to do a lot of things in my family. I was like, there is no blueprint for the person who is the first. Eve did not have a blueprint. And we bash her, quote unquote, for the decisions that she made, but we do it we have a different perspective than she had. She didn't have all the knowledge that we had, right? This is her first time on earth, first time in the garden. She doesn't realize, or maybe she did, I don't know, but from what we know from the story, she was a pioneer. And I just kind of wanted to paint a different picture for Eve. And
yeah.
so that's why she's my favorite, and that's why I chose her.
Yeah. And I love the part in the book where you said, a lot of times people think about how what Adam was thinking when he saw Eve. Like he was like, oh, this is my rib, this is flesh of my flesh. And we always get that story from the perspective of Adam seeing her for the first time, right? But I love that you took the spin of, what about Eve? What was Eve's perspective on Adam? She's like, okay, this is a man. What do I do with this? No, I'm just joking. She was
Right,
like,
right.
this is a man. So I love that perspective was kind of flipped as you wrote about it by saying, what was Eve's perspective? Because honestly, I've never really thought about it that way, and it's never really presented that way. It's always like, oh, Adam saw a woman and realized
Mhm.
she was flesh of his flesh and bone of his bone. So I
Yeah.
love that you did that with the story of Eve.
Yeah, and if I can expound on that, I wanted to really just hone in on the fact that Eve woke up to a prepared space. And that's really what this devotional is specifically about. Everything was prepared for her. And
Mm,
the preparation is God's demonstration of his love. And so
mm,
when we can look into our own lives and see the way that God has prepared things and prepared different parts of our lives and prepared us for different things in our lives, then we
yeah.
can look back and say, oh, that was God demonstrating his love for me. So
Hmm.
that was the main point of my devotion with Eve.
Yeah, awesome. So what about the woman with the issue of blood? Why do you choose her?
Yeah, the woman with the issue of blood, it's so ironic that we're having this conversation because I was up late last night on FaceTime with my daughter and we were going through the Bible and she's like, oh my gosh, some of these people have weird names. I said, well, there's some people who don't have a name at all, like the woman with the issue of blood. And I told her
Exactly.
the story about her and I said, we know all of these things about her. So many sermons have been preached about her, but nobody knows her name. And it's this whole what fascinates me about her is just that her
Yeah.
story is so powerful. Her faith was so powerful that it's been written about and talked about for centuries, but we don't know her name, and we may never know her name. And so that's what fascinated me about her.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true that she had so much persistence and she is definitely in the Hall of Fame of really showing us what faith is, demonstrating what faith is, and she has no name. So powerful.
Mhm.
So I love that you selected those individuals. So Deborah, I want to go to you and who you selected and also talk about your titles because your titles were great. Your titles and also Brigette's titles. I was like, these are books on their own. I don't know if you guys thought about it or if it's possible to do a whole book on your own sections, because these are great. Starting off with Mystery, Murder, and Mercy. It's like, can I open up that book and get started, right? The story of Bathsheba. Then you have Underestimate New Beginnings, story of Naomi. And then Genuine Christian Love, which is the story of Ruth. So why did you select Bathsheba, Naomi, and Ruth? And if I missed one, let me know, because I don't know if I caught all of the ones that you wrote.
No, you did. I chose those women. Let's start with the first one, Mystery, Murder, and Mercy, which is Bathsheba. And you know, David was the one we've all faced situations where should I not? Oh, she's married. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. But somehow Bathsheba and David that day made that mistake. And what I was trying to, how I resonate with that is every day, young women, older women, leaders are faced with choices. Okay. And sometimes we make a mistake. We make the choice and it's a mistake. But instead of correcting the mistake, we lie about it, we hide, and then it creates more and more issues like with David and Bathsheba. If he had confessed his sin in the beginning, he wouldn't have to get Uriah killed. That's murder. The mystery about it is like, oh, I like Bathsheba. Oh, yeah, I want to be with the king. I want to be with David. He's fine. He's head of everybody. She didn't say no. She could have said no, but maybe she was afraid to say no to David. I don't know. We'll never know. But she submitted to him. She got pregnant. Now he has to get her husband out of the way. So you see, it's one sin after another that kind of it just makes everything worse. And then at the end of that story, God was merciful. Yes, the baby died, but he turned around and blessed them with another child. And that child was part of the genealogy of Jesus, of David and Jesus and the whole thing. So at the end, God always has a plan. No matter what sin you've done, if you repent and it will be all cleared up. Now,
Yeah.
Naomi and Ruth is kind of like the same. Naomi, when she lost her husband, she said, I am, she thought was bitter to her. I relate to that because when I first got married, I was 20 years old. My husband got in an accident like 9 months after we got married. And I think and my daughter was 2 months old. I was living with my parents, and I'm like, God, what are you doing? Why did you do this to me? I'm a good person, so I felt like Naomi. I felt like God was punishing me for something I did or something. But at the end, it was rough. Yes, it was rough. And that's how I related to Naomi. No, yeah, to Naomi, when she lost her husband and she lost her sons and she had to go back. But in the end, it turned out to be okay for me. And Ruth, the new beginnings, never underestimate new beginnings. I mean, she decided, I am going with my mother-in-law. I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I go. Where you die, where you lay, I lay. And God ended up blessing them with, both of them, with to be a grandmother. She was a grandmother to the baby that Boaz and Ruth had. So, I just want people to know that, and myself to know that when God sets a plan in motion, no matter what you think, no matter how it's going, no matter how the pieces fall together, at the end, he is faithful and he's merciful. And we have to remember that once we keep the faith, that's important.
Mhm.
And that's why I chose those three women.
Yeah, I love that. It really tells the story that God has a plan. And like you said with Bathsheba, it's the ripple effect of sin, right? It's like, okay, now you got to kill someone. Oh, now we got to do this. And now it's like
Exactly.
everything starts to have this whole ripple effect of horribleness, when you step into that sin arena. But yet
Right.
God is so merciful. But yet God is so merciful towards each and every one of us. And people always, when it comes to David, talk about how God says David is a man after his own heart, right? And then they're like, how can David be a man after God's heart? And he did all these horrible things, right? God is so merciful and so forgiving. So there's so much we can learn from that story. So I love that Bathsheba was who you selected. And of course, Naomi, my gosh, she went through so much with the death of her husband, the death of her kids. And like you said, Deborah, a lot of us have those struggles in our life, those tragedies, those things that we think, why did this happen to us? But always keeping in mind that God has a plan and He's merciful, even through the trials, even through the tribulations, even through the issues. He's merciful and has a plan. And yeah, and so I love that. And then Ruth, new beginnings, right? Who knew? That's the great thing about God's plan. It's like a plot twist. It's like, okay, you're going down this road, and then whoop, now you're married and you're rich, and
Yeah.
it's such an amazing plot twist that God can do with his plans. He can always turn it around. So I love that your stories were about Bathsheba, Naomi, and Ruth. All right, Brejette, let's talk about you, Miss Four Chapters, Miss Writer, who didn't even know she was a writer and wasn't even sure she wanted to be on the project. So I have that you wrote, "You are worthy of God's vision. Yes, you," which is the story of Deborah, the mother of a miracle child, who me, Elizabeth, more than a woman, you are a warrior, JL. I hope I'm saying that right, because honestly, I wasn't familiar with that character. So that was one of the ones that was like, who? So yeah, it was definitely learning new people, new women in the Bible. And then move out of the way, Tamra. So I'd love for you to share, Brejette, why you chose those four women and those particular stories.
Well, I believe the same as mentioned, like each story like rung dear to like different situations of my life, right? Which was the point of the book, right? To explain that. And I don't think I even knew that until I got into that writing mode. Even knowing their stories, it was like, okay, when we think about like the miracle child, it's one thing to read somebody's story and to hear like God's promises for them and see how they push through the hardships. But when you're actually like going through the motions, which I think is the whole purpose about like lining your life up with the Bible in the first place, is like you understand that you're not alone, right? You're like, okay, well, if I'm going through this person went through that, like you said, everybody's not so bad, whatever that looks like. And thinking about, in my life, having have raised so many different children from just young into older, and then kind of like, well, God, what about me? Thinking about like, well, where's my promise? And then when it comes with so much like turmoil and chaos and stress. And it's like, well, is this really what I wanted? Is this really what I'm supposed to have? Right. Which was like part of my story. But then like being able to push through, like with like how Elizabeth did, like she kind of mocked God and was just kind of like, yeah, okay, we'll see. And I think we go through that. We go through that. And then the enemy has a way of trying to take that blessing and turning it against us. And then, so just being able to go through that story, that was my whole thing with Elizabeth. My son is a miracle child, and all the things that we've gone through, he's now 11, have just shown me again God's promises every year. It's like, yep, every new skill he learns, every new time that he shows out, in a positive way, every time, it just shows me. And he's one of a kind. And as a mom of one, I don't know what that looks like with duplicates, right? Because I'm like, how can you where do you go from here? Because he's just such an amazing blessing. So just being able to understand that God's promises, I mean, they're yes and amen, and you have to just be able to see through, walk by faith, not by sight, right? You got to just step it out. You just got to keep going. If he tells you it's going to happen, you got to believe him, and then you just got to keep showing up.
I'd love for you, Brejette, not to cut you off, but to share a little bit more about your story, your miracle child. We know Elizabeth's story, right? But not a lot of people listening don't necessarily know your specific story, and sometimes that can be inspiring. So tell us a little bit about why your child is a miracle child. What was your actual backstory?
Okay, so from the very point of finding out that I was pregnant, it was like, okay, you're pregnant. It was like, yay, great, all these, the things. And then from like that very first checkup appointment, I got really, really sick from the very beginning, really, really sick. And so when I went in, they were like, oh, what's going on? I had lost a lot of weight. And they were like, concerned about what that looked like. And then going into the next couple of months, every appointment was like, we don't know what's happening. Like, the body's too small, the head's too big, this is what's happening, the baby's not breathing, the baby's not moving, the baby's not doing what we needed to do. And I actually had doctors ask me, like, if abortion was a thing, like, since we don't know, maybe you should, just not follow through, there's so many uncertainties, there's so many things. And I was a young mom, like I didn't know nothing about pregnancy and what that looked like. I always had, helped with the kids after they were already out. So actually going through that pregnancy space, being in a rocky relationship, or rocky, marriage, and then not having a whole lot of support in that space, it was really hard to see it as a blessing. I mean, it was like, this is my first time, and I hadn't had any other pregnancies. I hadn't experienced what that was like. So, and then when you see the stories and, you hear people's pregnancy stories, it's always so beautiful and so like delightful. And I'm like, there's no way, like every appointment was like something crazy. Well, my son ended up being born at 28 weeks. He was 28 weeks and 6 days, I believe.
Wow.
And so at that point, we knew that there was potential for, breathing issues, that, vision not fully developed, and then just a whole bunch of unknowns. And I mean, he was 28 pounds. No, he wasn't. He was, how big was my son?
28 weeks and
He was at 28 weeks, but he was, wow, I told the story so much and I just went blank, but he was less than 2 pounds. And he was only 13 inches long. And he was like, like, I don't know if people know, like little baby animals, when they're not fully developed, and you're just kind of like, when you hear these things and you're wondering like what it looks like. But when I went to go see him in that, in the NICU, and he was like perfect. He was this perfect little mini thing, that was there. So being able to see him, and then being able to even believe God's promises from there, that he was going to be okay. Because there was a lot of blood transfusions, there was a lot of tests being ran, there was uncertainties about his vision, his breathing, his everything. And even seeing other babies in the NICU that were not making it, or that were having huge struggles, or whatever that looked like, the odds with him being a boy versus a girl, the odds of the months he was born, the even versus the odd, and all these things. And being able to just, believe God for that, and so he's 11 years old now. He is fine. Everything. I mean, he is like doing amazing. There's no really a whole bunch of vision impairment. There's not, nothing major that they thought, no autism, no, nothing like that. A little bit of education delay, but I think that that's because he's just super special in other spaces. So it's just kind of trying to find that balance with him. But, but if I would have believed man, right? If I would have believed what I was told, if I would have believed the scare tactics and the fears that the enemy brought on, I never would have known. I never would have known this amazing kid that I have. So that's pretty much, the story, and just being able to push through in that space of the unknown. And he was in the hospital for 3 months, because he was born at 7 months. He was in the hospital the full 3 months. And that was staying on top of his care, that was checking in with doctors, that was being present while trying to recover, while going through a crazy, marriage. It was a lot, but, but God. So that's the story with that.
Yeah, awesome. See, I love that. I knew I had to go deeper on your story. I'm like, we don't know your story. How about you share it? Yeah. So no, that is amazing, and it definitely shows God is a miracle worker. So do you want to go into a little bit more about the others, Deborah, JL, and Tamara, and why you chose them and the story, how it relates to you?
Yeah, so Deborah, I've had many individuals in ministry and things like you're a Deborah, like just based on like my strategic mind and the way that I move things, and I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, okay, let me dig into this a little deeper. And when I really understood, like I said, as where I'm at now is not even where I was when I wrote it. And again, like you mentioned, that the development of God and what he can do in these moments of, where it starts and then kind of where it takes you. Being a visionary and having discernment and being able to understand what it's like, what it means to be a seer. And I mean, I know there's a lot of these terms that are kind of like what, but when you're able to see things and you're able to really it's hard to explain sometimes, even like God will come to certain women, to different people that have the gift of being a seer or a visionary, or things of that, those gifts that we have that we don't understand. And a lot of times it's a lot, because you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, what is going on here? So to be able to know that there was another woman in the Bible, that she was one of the very few women, for one. She had a very high place and a high ranking when it came to God, and what like her gifts were. And then to be able to prophesy such a huge change of events, and to then be able to stand strong and be like, no, this is what God said, and this is what needs to happen, and this is how you need to follow it, and what that looks like. And when we look at that in real time, it doesn't always go the way you imagine it happening. People doubt. They're like, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about. And so for me, I think that was one of the stories, to understand that you are called and you do have vision. And for those that have that gift, look at it as a blessing versus a curse. But you do have to get in alignment with others that understand what that's like. Because when people don't understand, they will block that from you. They will try to take that away from you. And sometimes you do feel a little crazy. You're like, what is this? But I mean, I think for me, that's why I dug into that book. And that was a lot of, now, the reason why I feel like there was a connection with that chapter. But back then it was just really understanding what is vision, right? And how do we stick to what God has told us, what he's shown us, what he's told us that we can have, even when man dangles these like temporary fixes and jobs and even money. Sometimes that's the dangle, right? What do we take? What are the avenues in the past that we take versus what God has shown us and promised us, right? It's like, but I could easily just take this job and go over here and have this money and be secure in this space, but at what cost, right? What's the cost for that? And so I think that was, the big one with Deborah.
Okay. And Tamara?
So that one was a tough one. I'm like Allison with that one, because when we look at the story, there's some manipulation, there's some things, but she also was promised some things. There were some things that were her rights, she was supposed to be heir to, that she was supposed to receive, right? And again, in the space of trying to do the right things, going about life the right way, you realize that it doesn't always pan out the way you think it should, or the way, the others in the, I guess I'll say, situation or transaction or whatever we may have put in place, and what that might look like, right? She was promised, one brother, he couldn't do right, so then he passed away. And then, then the next brother, same thing, couldn't do right by her. What did that look like? And a lot of times as women, we take that as our fault. What did I do wrong? What could be happening, right? What was I supposed to be doing? And then, at that point, that's like, well, it seems to be you. So we're just going to have to, you can't have any more of my sons. We're not going to do this, pretty much try to break the arrangement. But at the end of the day, what's for you is for you, regardless of what. If God says it's yours, you're going to have it, and you're going to get what God promised you. And I think that even in the space of the manipulation, which we know, I've learned that You know, a lot of times we maneuver in manipulation and we think like, oh, well, if I'm doing it with the right heart or the right purpose or the right meaning or whatever, then, you know, no, manipulation is manipulation at the end of the day, right? And we have to get into learning what that's about and where are the places that we might do that to try to make things work out in our good. But at the end of the day, she got what was hers, right? God made sure that she received what was hers, even in a whole craziness, right? I think about that even in just my life, like the ways and the places and the spaces that you have to be able to just be steadfast and just continue to show up in the walk of life, because life is going to life. Things are going to happen, but we have to be able to just stay the course, right? And without the pieces, because we are human, so we may, you know, like Ms. Deborah said earlier, we might walk into some things that might not necessarily be the way it was supposed to happen. But even when we fall short, you just got to continue to move forward. You got to be able to recognize it, ask for forgiveness, move forward, and continue to move in that space. And I think that that's like the main thing with that one. It's like, you know, life is going to life, but you know what your promises are. You keep showing up. You keep doing the work, even if, you know, nobody else shows up, even if nobody else is doing it, even if you're alone in the space, because a lot of us are called in a space that has never even been created. We are the one to create the space. We are the one to create the path. So we're looking for these blueprints and for other people to lead us and guide us and show us the way. And you are the way. You are the one that's going to create the path. And we have to be able to walk in that strength and understand that, you know, and only with God do we learn how to navigate those waters. Because, you know, there's a, like Allison said, being the first in a lot of places, it's like, okay, God, but without him, you will, you know, prolong the journey and you'll go through things that you don't have to. So if we can just, you know, lean close to that. JL as a warrior, and that's the pronunciation I have. I don't know, is it JL?
That's how I
I'm not
say it.
even familiar. So,
Okay, so
Yeah,
yeah.
I say jail.
it's JL. In a society, and even with this project, I think about it, you know, being in a men-driven world where it's like they're the warriors, they're the ones that get, you know, the outcome of the story. But we understand that women a lot of times are the supports, the you know, I don't really know how to break it down, but a lot of times the stories where the men come out to be like the big
Hero.
warriors and things like that, there are women along the way that help them. And for
Yeah.
me, the story of JL was like seeing a woman that wasn't even necessarily reared in the place of warfare, or like I see it as like she didn't even know like what kind of was happening. She kind of used like her discernment, like in a sense it was like, okay, I got this person here, like what am I supposed to do, right? Not even realizing that her actions were going to lead to such a big revolution, right? To lead to, you know, what that looked like for her. And so in that space, again, it's alignment with these stories, because we don't always know the outcome of what God asks us to do and where he calls us to be. And I don't think at the end of the day, it even matters, right? We think it does. Like I'm a person that and I think because as being a visionary, I'm like, okay, God, show me, right? You've shown me things before. Can you just show me the steps and I'll just follow you? And he's like, it's not like that, right? You have to show up. There's some things I need you to develop. There's some head bumps I need you to find. But for me, it's always like, but what's at the end of this? Like, how do I know that I've, you know, done what you've asked me to do? And it's like just following and obeying, being obedient, right? And so in this story, I don't even think she knew, like, you know, what this act was going to lead to for her. And in our lives, I don't think we know that either. In the intricate parts that we play, and the things that we do, and the ways that we show up. And even in the ways that we show up when there's not a crowd, right? A lot of times it's for the 1, for the 3, for the 7. But we get so caught up in a world where it's numbers and all these things and the attention that we forget that the call is not always that, right? And so I think for me, just being able to see these women like for them and in their, like, I guess I would say like rightful places where we were able to shine the lights on. These are the developments of the different things that we have today, right? Women that stood their ground, that even when told no, they continued to move forward. Even when they couldn't see it, they continued to walk by faith, right? And God even blesses sometimes, you know, because it's always a big thing, like don't ask questions, right? Well, no, I don't believe that to be true, because how do we learn if we don't ask? And who else are we supposed to ask if we can't ask him? And then, you know, just being able to know that you are called, if you believe it, if you feel it, if you You are. Yes, you. Quit trying to put it on somebody else, right? Quit trying to
Yeah.
put that project on somebody else. Quit trying to put that book on somebody else. Quit trying to put that ministry on somebody else. It's you. Now step into that light, and how are you going to make it work, right? And what does that look like for you and God in your future? So
Yeah.
that is kind of what
Yeah. I
happened.
love it.
Again, I don't
That's
know
so
the
good.
listener what I planned, but it's not about me, right? So
Exactly. So good, Brejette. So good. Everything that you talked about for each one of these ladies. It makes me want to crack open my Bible and read these stories again, right?
Right?
Motivating me to go deeper on these stories, especially the ones I'm not as familiar with. So I'm going to wrap up with this question about I know you guys have said a lot about, your stories and what you've shared and what you want the readers to take away from it. But if you were to wrap it up with one word, one phrase, one sentence of what you would want people to walk away with after reading your sections, what would that, it might be difficult to sum it up in one word, one phrase, one sentence, but what would that one word, one phrase, or what one sentence be for your section? So I'll start with Allison. So Allison, what would that one words, one phrase be for, maybe for the, actually, I'll go back to Allison because I want her to answer for the book in general. So I'll go to Deborah and say, for your section, what would be that one word, one phrase, one sentence that you'd want people to walk away with from reading it?
Let's see. I would have to say, when you're going through the valleys, just trust God. Like Brejette says, just show up, believe in God, follow his plan, trust the process, and don't quit is my thing. God is faithful, and he'll always be there for you once you put your faith in him. I have
Awesome. I love
experienced
it.
that in my life, and I will tell anyone that. Just trust the process, trust God.
Trust God, trust the process, and have faith. Love it, Deborah. Brejette, what about you? What would be that one word, one sentence, one phrase that you would want people to walk away from those different sections that you wrote? I know it's difficult, but
I'd say that you are not alone. I mean, I think that sums them all up because your situation is not unique. It's uniquely yours in the characters and what plays out, but you're not alone.
yeah, I love it. God is with you. You are not alone. I will never leave you or forsake you, is what his word says. So you are never alone. So, Allison, the question for you is, what would you want people to walk away from reading this entire book, this project that God put on your heart? What would be that one word, one phrase, one sentence that you would like people to walk away from reading the heart of God for her?
Hmm. So, first of all, God's love is everlasting. It's not just for the women in the Bible, it's for you too. And a woman, God loves you, and you have a purpose, and not just a purpose. The purpose that you're put here for is powerful, whether you consider it small or big, whether they know your name or not. You have a purpose, and it serves a powerful point or purpose in God's story. And so I would just say, step into that, embrace the love of God, and step into your purpose. And that would be what I want to make sure they take away from reading this book.
Awesome. I love it. You have a powerful purpose. It's not limited to the women of the Bible and their stories, whether they have a name or they don't have a name, but you have a powerful purpose too. So I love that. That is the message that you desire the readers to take away. Now, what's the best way for them to purchase the book? I know you provided a link, Amazon link, and we'll provide that in the show notes. Is that the best place for them to go to purchase the book?
Yeah, so they can purchase it from Amazon. Of course, that might be the fastest way to receive it unless they are in one of the localities with us. But you can also purchase from any of the individual co-authors that you may be connected to on social media, or if the ladies have an opportunity to share how you can reach them, you can order directly from one of them as well.
Yep, exactly. Which is my next question. How can everyone reach each one of you? So I'll start with Deborah. How can people reach you? Social media, website, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, they can reach me. I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook as Deborah DeCoteau. Simple.
Deborah DeCoteau, Instagram and Facebook, right?
Yes.
Awesome. And Brejette, how can people reach you?
They can reach me at my website, empowermentwithbree.com. Social media, you can find me Empowerment with Bree on Instagram. And then, of course, my first and last name, Brejette Emery, on Facebook.
Awesome. So definitely connect with Brejette on those social media platforms. And last but not least, Allison, how can people connect with you?
Absolutely. So my website is branditbeautifully.com, branditbeautifully.com. And of course, those will take you to my social media. You can schedule a call with me or what have you if you want to talk to me. But my social media handle is I'm Allison Denise. I'm Allison Denise on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So definitely connect with all of these amazing authors of The Heart of God for Her and go out and purchase the book, whether that's through Amazon, whether that's through one of the authors that's on the panel today, or if you're connected with one of the other 10, 11 authors, definitely reach out to them about purchasing this amazing book about the heart of God for her. Thank you, ladies. This has been a joy and a pleasure. This whole panel thing is new to me. So it's like being able to navigate it with you ladies has been awesome. And I've just loved the conversation. So I thank each and every one of you for being a part of the Women, Faith Plus Business podcast. Thank you for listening to the Women, Faith Plus Business podcast. I hope this episode has been insightful and inspiring and has offered you an opportunity to take action to transform your life and your business. Wherever you are listening, be sure to rate and review the podcast and also subscribe to get the next episode right in your inbox by going to womenfaithandbusiness.com to join our email list.